people to show up and start, but I am very, very excited. Hey, Lucy. I am very excited for tonight. For those of you who did not catch my stories or the posts that I put up, tonight's show is going to be a little bit different. Usually I spend this time to connect with all of you and commiserate about motherhood and laugh and cry and do all the things we do when we are just talking about how crazy our children are making us and just the ins and outs of being in the trenches. And I know that I've spoken to a lot of my fellow content creators and meme makers and mommy bloggers, and all of us are we're struggling, trying to figure out what is appropriate and what is respectful in terms of continuing to be authentic and comedic, because despite everything that is going on in our world, people do need levity, and we know that, and people want to still find those points of connection with one another and almost have an escape from the darkness and so many things that we're watching go on in our world. And so we do that by continuing to share jokes and be funny and try and make you guys laugh and take our minds off of the heavy stuff. And normally I'm totally on board with that, because I believe that laughter is medicine and levity is medicine, and we can't take everything so seriously. But I felt very strongly about doing something different tonight because my heart is heavy and I am not a woman of color. I can't pretend to know what it feels like to be a black mother, a black writer, I can't, I won't pretend to understand on that level. But what I do know is that we need to have this conversation, and this is like perfect timing because my guest, who I'm so excited, Arianna, is joining us from Not Your Average Mom. So I'm going, hopefully technology works in our favor. You just never know what's going to happen. You stare, oh, there she is. Hi. Can you hear me? I don't hear you. I don't know why.
You.
Oh, I hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, it
Okay.
was kind of on a lag. Okay, yes. Now I can hear you. Now it works.
Did it.
Yeah.
The hard part is done.
The worst part, the part that could have totally completely tanked us, is done. So that's good. So now we just have to make sure that I don't say anything that tanks us. So
you can say anything. You can say anything, and I do not care. I am of the belief, and I believe this not just with what's going on now, but in general. I think it takes a long time to get comfortable with saying and doing certain things online, because you always have that fear that you're going to piss someone off or you're going to lose an audience. And I've just at my 43 years in age and all of this shit that I've been through, I have learned that if people leave because of something I post or share, regardless of whether it's a joke or serious, then they're not my people, and bye. Because I don't, I can't play that game anymore. I'm here to be real and authentic, and that's part of the reason that I'm so happy you are joining me here in my space tonight. Welcome to my closet.
It's a very nice closet. It's an awesome closet.
Only place I have to go where I have a door that I can close and not have children in my face. And
I feel it.
So that's why we're here. But I know that you and I talked about this. This came together like very last minute because I didn't know what I was going to do tonight. And so, number one, I'm so appreciative that you were willing and agreed to do this, because I know that you took a little bit of a step back from social media for the last few days to collect yourself and kind of process, and I respect that. And so I felt even uncomfortable asking you if this was something that you would even have an interest in doing. So I'm so humbled and honored that you are even joining me to do this. So thank you. First of all, thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. And I really want this time, whatever time we spend together, to be about you. I want to listen. And so I'm going to ask questions, and I'm going to, contribute to the conversation. And I'm not going to put you on the spot with anything you feel uncomfortable with. But I know that as a white woman, I can't pretend to know what you're going through. And I won't, because I think that's the most disrespectful. I think that it's our job right now to listen and to understand and to find ways that we can support and contribute. And I think there are so many people out there who genuinely want to help and to be allies. And I think people just don't know where to start. And we watch the news and we see protests and we see these things happening, and people get fearful because they think, well, is that how I have to contribute? Do I have to be on the front lines? Do I have, you know? And so I think there's a lot of education that needs to happen in terms of what people in your position feel like an ally looks like and does. And I really want to hear those honest thoughts from you. But before, I want to know how you are. How are you?
I'm doing better. Like you said, I had to take a step back because the words that people have been using lately, the attitudes that people have had, the responses that I have been seeing and getting myself on social media, I fought the good fight for probably about 3 days straight, and I couldn't do it anymore. So I took a break, sobbed for like 2 days, and I am cry free today. So that's a step forward.
That is a big step forward.
That's a step forward. But I was kind of telling some friends of mine this. I'm still not able to. I enjoy writing funny things. I enjoy being a humor writer. I enjoy making people laugh. And I am not at the point where I can do that again yet.
I think that's so, and I can't even imagine the level that you feel that at, because just before you came on, I said, the reason I switched tonight and decided to do this was because I am struggling trying to figure out what is acceptable and what is appropriate. And I don't want to be disrespectful in a time where we really need to take a look at our country and figure out how we come together and fix this and throw up random jokes. But I also know that we need levity and we need normalcy, and we need something that makes us connect to other people and other women and other mothers. And I know this space has always been that for me. And so I feel that, I understand. But from your perspective, I can't even imagine sitting down and writing.
I mean, it's been a very weird situation, because generally when I have a joke that enters my head, it stays there and I'm able to write it down and I'm able to like use it later. And lately I have been in this place where a joke enters my mind and it's almost like it immediately leaves. It's just gone. It's almost like I just don't have room in my head right now. Until I am able to have it stick, I'm not coming back for a while. But I'm hoping it won't be too long. But right now, that was a long answer to your question, but I'm okay. I'm doing better. Good. So thank you for asking.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. One of the things, that I talked about in the post and that you and I traded some messages about is the idea of being an ally. It's a word that's been thrown around a lot in the last, few days alone. And I do believe that there's a lot of authenticity behind it for many people. Then for some people, I think it is a little bit opportunistic at times. And I think it's kind of easy to tell the difference depending on what you see. But I would love to know, from your perspective, what an ally looks like. And when you mentioned before that you've seen words and all these things, messages online that make you upset. I would love to know where, and I know it's just your opinion, but I'd love to know where the line is and what kinds of things upset you and what kinds of things make you feel the support from the white community and other communities that do need to be allies, especially in a time like this.
That's a great question. And I've been thinking about it pretty much all afternoon. And the truth is, a lot of people assume that intent is enough to be an ally. They assume that, because I want to help you. And maybe they even do on the regular, right? Maybe they give to people of color often. Maybe they have like a Black cousin or father or something like that. So they feel, well, I'm an ally because I love those people. And I would never hurt anyone. And it goes further than that. Being an ally means that you are an advocate, not just for us, but for change. And a lot of people don't take that extra step. I'm going to use the example that threw me over the edge last week. So I made a tweet, and in the tweet, I was calling for, I had so many friends write me saying, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that this is happening. I'm so sorry. This must be so hard for you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And those sorries meant nothing to me. They meant nothing to me because, yes, you can be sorry, but people have been sorry for years. What good has that done? We're still where we are right now. So I wrote a tweet basically saying, listen, stop telling me you're sorry. Like, I want you to use your anger. I want you to get mad. And I made a joke, kind of riffing off the Karen thing. And I was like, yeah, use that anger like they sold the last cranberry White Claw and, ask for a refund, demand the manager.
But that's a good joke. But that's a good way to bring, that's a good joke.
Well, see, I thought so. I thought so. And many people apparently did think so. But there were a lot of people, both on Twitter and on Instagram. I did not post it on Instagram because I was tired of arguing on Twitter, but a very good friend of mine, Sam of The Decent Mother, posted it in support of me. And she fielded so many comments calling me racist, saying that talking about any race is wrong. And I kept coming in and saying, this can't be racism. Like, how can you consider yourself? Because people were using the words ally. You're losing an ally. And I said, how are you an ally if the moment that I am asking you, like, for a call to arms, even if you don't like the joke, your first response is not to ask questions. It's not to say, well, you know what? I didn't like the joke, but the point is salient. Instead of doing that, they made it about themselves. Mm-hmm. And they tried to find a way to make it a negative on me. Because if I'm wrong, right, then they're not entirely wrong for not getting angry.
It takes the heat off of them.
Exactly. It's kind of the attitude that a lot of people are having about the protests right now. When we brought up George Floyd before, people didn't really have a lot to say because it was very hard, because of the video, to say things are you're right, we're wrong, things are bad right now. It was very hard to say anything other than that, and that made people feel very uncomfortable. But then when some people who really, from what I'm finding, may not have even actually been true protesters, were causing riots and damaging things, then it gave them something to hold on to. Then it gave them something to come forward with and say, oh, no, I'm a total ally for change. I believe that racism is bad. But why are you blowing things up? Why are you setting fires? And in that moment, you realize when people say those things that they're not true allies, because the line between an ally and someone who's not is change. If you are looking at that and you're saying, okay, I don't agree with this, but I get where it's coming from, and I am going to use my voice to help with change, that's one thing. When you're taking your voice and you're using it to smack down the efforts of people who are out there and angry in order to make them sound bad so that you don't feel quite as bad, you're no longer an ally. And that kind of actually brings me to one other point. I will say, to be fair to a lot of people, I think that when we talk about racism and alliances, we use way too many pretty metaphors to the point where people get very confused. And we'll say, don't talk over people of color. And people hear, okay, so I let them speak and then I tell them I'm wrong. I tell them they're wrong, right? And it's like, that's not what that means. Like, we're not saying literally, don't talk over me or interrupt me.
Right. We're saying, listen.
Yeah, what we're saying is, even if you don't feel like what you did is wrong, if we, the ones who are being damaged by what's happening, are saying, I am being damaged by what you just did, instead of trying to educate us on why we're wrong, listen. Mm-hmm. Take it for the truth that it probably is. Now, are there times where people might be wrong? Sure. But most of the time, like that trope of us being mad over nothing, we generally don't.
Well, that, and I also think it's very, very presumptuous for anyone of any race to be dismissive of someone who's feeling something because of current political climate, protest, whatever it is, I think it's incredibly disrespectful and dismissive for anyone who is not part of that specific sect that is being affected to tell someone they can't feel a certain way or that
Exactly.
they're wrong for feeling a certain way. And that part blows my mind, because even if you can't empathize with somebody who's going through challenging times because there's a spotlight shined on their culture,
Mm-hmm.
I'm dumbfounded by people who feel the need to constantly shake their finger and tell people that they're not allowed to feel
that way. And
yeah.
yeah, no, I 100% agree. And honestly, it's so odd because I don't know how I went this long without having these conversations. I really don't. Because, you know, I knew that they were happening, but I wasn't having them myself. And I think that it came from, and you brought this up at the beginning, it came from a fear. And it's a really weird thing to be afraid that you can't tell people how you feel because of how your race is being treated. Like, it's already weird, you know, when you can't talk about dark things that are going on at home as a mom, as a person. But when you're like, should I talk about the fact that it's wrong that somebody kneeled on a black man until he died? Won't that upset people? That's when you realize that there really is a systematic inequality. There's a systematic inequality there. And if,
100%.
yeah, and if you're an ally, you should be welcoming, just as welcoming as you would be to hear about a white child dying or a white man dying or a white woman dying. You should be just as welcoming for that news and just as upset at that news as you are about the loss of a white life or an Indian life or you know, any other life really is precious. It's important. And it's just, that's kind of a thing that I've noticed that it just, we don't even notice it because it's so ingrained. It's so systemic, right?
That, and I think people take a situation when they see it happen, and I'm sure you're seeing this too. What is mind-blowing to me is, listen, there's only one way to look at this. We saw the tapes, we saw what happened. A man was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and
Yes,
simple. Take
absolutely.
color out of it for a second. A man was murdered.
A man was murdered.
And some people get so fearful of facing that and talking about the reality of what that means, they
Mm-hmm.
start to dangle shiny objects like, well, wait, now you're saying that cops are bad. Not all cops are bad. Who's
Yeah.
talking? I'm not, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I mean, so I think there's so many things that get muddled because people
Mm-hmm.
are so fearful of addressing the topic at hand, and it's so dangerous. And
It is.
I don't, you know, I don't know why I know why we're divided. I know why our country is divided, but I cannot for the life of me figure out how anybody could see this any other way, and how anybody could feel anything but compassion for people who are targeted because of the color of their skin, because of something like this. I can't. I know that sounds like stupid and naive.
No, it doesn't sound stupid. It doesn't sound stupid at all. It's just one of those things that don't if you don't actually see it in person, it's not something that you get. But I have had enough conversations with people at this point that I have realized that it's toddler brain, as a friend of mine once called it. Like, I'm pretty sure everybody here is a mom. And imagine that you're talking to a little kid, and the little kid has stolen a cookie. And you know that this child has stolen a cookie. And you say, "Did you steal the cookie?" The child is going to, their brain is going to short circuit, because yes, they stole the cookie, but they know that they will be in trouble because they stole the cookie. They feel guilty because they stole the cookie. So the next thing that's going to come out of their mouth is going to be completely nonsensical and have nothing to do with cookies, because they don't want to admit that they did it, but they also have to say something. And so I have seen this happen with adults, because we still, some of us, I should say some of us, because true allies I have seen, and I'm very lucky to have them, are very good at working past this. And it takes a lot of self-talk and a lot of self-work. I'm not saying it's not. But I have seen adults, grown adults that I've talked to, that the moment that I start talking about race, it triggers that little toddler part of their brain. And they're like, I'm uncomfortable and I want this to end. And I don't want to have to think about the fact that maybe, you know, I might be getting something more than what this woman is getting right now in society. and their brain just clicks, and suddenly they're talking about something that has absolutely nothing to do with what I'm bringing up. And like you said, it's a shiny dangle. It's something to try to change the subject to somewhere where they feel they have the higher ground, so that they don't have to argue. And yeah, that's that. You have to avoid that feeling. You have to avoid the automatic primal instinct that this is making me feel bad and therefore I must do something to change it, because it needs to make you feel bad. I'm not saying be guilty. I feel like people get all ruffled up and say, "Oh, should I feel bad for being white?" No. But if you feel bad about what's going on right now, you're going to move to change what's going on right now.
I've seen a lot of people write that sentiment, that if we as white people are feeling uncomfortable, that's good. And we should be embracing it and figuring out why we feel uncomfortable, what we can do to change it from our, from our perspective, from our own actions. And so I think it's one of those things that it's like, I always talk about vulnerability. People always say vulnerability is weakness. I think vulnerability is strength, because you're showing yourself. I think it's a very similar idea with being uncomfortable with something, because for years we've been conditioned to be uncomfortable having these conversations. It's the same thing, like you said earlier, with motherhood. For so many years, nobody talked about the hard parts of motherhood. Nobody talked about it.
Nope.
Now, the doors are open to those conversations, and look where we are now. So many people are talking about miscarriage and postpartum depression, all these things that were so taboo. And so I do believe that there hopefully will become a time where these things now that make us uncomfortable continue to evolve. But it's very disarming to me that people who are so willing to turn a blind eye to it.
It's not good. It's not good at all. It's not. And so you know, when we're talking about allyship, is that a word? I don't know. Alliance, allyship.
Very fancy and professional.
Let's just go ahead and say allyship. Yeah. I don't know if that's true. But like when we're talking about that, like, yeah, talking about these things is very, very important. And I feel like one of the things that helps, at least, is realizing, and I can't think of a nicer way to put this, that all we have been taught about racism is bullshit. It really is. We were taught, and I had a friend who said this, and I don't know if she's watching right now, but if you are, Sarah, thank you very much for pointing this out, because she is correct. When you're in school, you learn that racism is one thing. You learn that racism is not being allowed to drink at the same water fountains, being sprayed by fire hoses by the police, by, owning slaves, like really heavy,
the stuff you see in
stuff.
History books, the really extreme examples.
Yes, that's what we know racism to be. And it isn't until you get older that you realize that the big stuff, the overt stuff, is no longer okay. But the little things, the things that we have been ensconced in as a society, are still there. They're still there. What? And for example, and I'm just going to use this because this is the fastest thing I can think of, hair. And that's a really weird thing, but for those of you who do not know, I used to have long, luscious locks, kind of like Rachel. And what I did is I have a little girl who has wild curly hair. And I remember growing up with curly hair and consistently being shown in words and in deeds that when my hair was straightened, I was prettier. And I was always second place to girls who had blonde hair and blue eyes.
People would make comments to you, like when it was straight and it wasn't curly.
Right. When it was
beautiful.
When I would straighten it, some people would be like, "Wow, you look great!" Like, yeah, that was the only time that I would ever, get any sort of. And I actually even had a boyfriend at one point who was like, "Oh, I'm really glad you're going to go get your hair straightened soon because I like running my fingers through your hair and I can't do it when it's curly." And you don't realize things like that affect you until you get older. And every time that my hair would grow out, I would be afraid to leave the house because I was afraid that I wasn't attractive until my hair was straight again. And I was like, I don't want my daughter to grow up like that. I want her to have her own beauty standard. So I buzzed it off. And actually, it turns out I totally and completely love it. And this is what I've got.
You rock it hard. You do.
Thank you. But so basically stuff like that. It's taught to us. Even in those comments that I was talking about with the White Claw tweet, there were quite a few people who really just did not like me talking back. It wasn't necessarily the joke. It was the fact that when I would start speaking and I would say, hey, this isn't racism and this is why, let me explain, they would respond with, I actually had one person who responded with, well, just be careful what you say. Because, you know, how dare a brown woman speak back to a white woman? And that's still there. And we've been taught that racism is gone. You know, we voted in Obama. Racism is dead.
For us.
And
That's it.
we did it. We did it, everybody. And it's like, no, that's not, like, it was great, but no, you know? And so once we realize that those things that we've been taught are all bullshit, and that being wrong doesn't mean you're stupid, and that not knowing doesn't mean you're stupid, and that asking questions isn't always necessarily a bad thing.
Well, I'm sure people would rather have questions asked, even if the person asking them feels uncomfortable or ashamed or embarrassed or whatever emotion you feel. Mm-hmm. Isn't it better to ask those questions and have the conversation than remain silent and make assumptions and then perpetuate that silent racism that exists?
Well, it is and it isn't. I will say yes. I am one of those people. I love to educate. As you can tell, I will talk. So anytime that anybody wants to ask me anything, as long as it is genuinely from a place of learning and not from a place of trying to stump me so that they can, you know, assume that they've won the conversation, I'm happy to answer any question. Mm-hmm. But I do want to say, and I almost never say that I'm speaking for all people of color, but I feel like I've heard this enough that it's a pretty widespread answer. Don't automatically assume that every person of color wants to teach. Some of them just don't have the energy. And
That's fair.
Yeah. And I even sometimes just don't have the energy after I've spent the whole day trying to explain to people who don't want to listen. Mm-hmm. If you ask me, you know, I might not have the energy. And I am usually going to be kind enough to say, I just don't have the energy in me right now. I will answer your question when I can. Or, you know, maybe you might want to try reading this article instead of asking me. I'm going to be kind. Some people won't. And you really can't tone police this kind of thing because some people are tired and some people are angry. Right. And you can't be demanding that they are kind. And this was a term that somebody used. Be kind and polite and non-argumentative.
Right.
Some people are not going to want to be that way because they have been trying to be kind and non-argumentative, and see where we are now.
Well, I was going to say I think that there are people of every race who are mm-hmm. kind and willing to answer questions and do the education piece of it. But there's so many people out there whose minds cannot be swayed, cannot be changed. They are set in their ways. It doesn't matter how many conversations you have. And I think that big roadblock is also what keeps people remaining in fear mm-hmm. of being allies, because they say to themselves, well, what difference am I going to make? There's all these people who clearly I don't agree with, but they're set in their ways. If I start to get loud, or if I start to speak up, or if I start to sign petitions, or if I start to go to protests, how am I going to change anyone's minds? And I think right. that it becomes one of those mind fucks, right? Like people are like, I want to speak out, I want to help, I want to do something, but I'm faced with people who will not listen. I'm faced right. with people who don't want to change. They're fine with the way that it is.
You do. You start feeling like your voice is not important. And I have had so many people talk over me myself sometimes that I'm just like, why am I bothering? Nobody is listening to me. And I have gotten to the point where I have realized, and I think that this is very important for anyone who wants to be an ally, don't focus on the people who are not listening to you. Someone is always listening. Someone is always listening. And maybe they're not saying anything, but you are being observed. And if you are showing that you are in support of change, and being in support of change does not mean that you have to march. I don't march. I'm not going to march because, frankly, it's a little different for me because I feel like I would have a very good chance of being tear gassed, sad to say. But my strength is words. My strength is speaking. My strength is writing. My strength is communication. So I am trying to bring about change by speaking, by writing, by talking. That's what I'm trying to do. And so maybe you are not a person who wants to go to a march, and that is fine. Sometimes, you know what one of the strongest forms of allyship is? And I did see down here, by the way, that allyship is a word. So I learned a thing. The strongest form of allyship to me is standing up to your friends and family. And I think that a lot of people are so uncomfortable with that. Like I have had people who have said to my face, "Oh my gosh, I am an agent for change," and then they have like a racist grandma that they just don't say anything to, and it's like, okay, if some people, like you said, just don't want to learn, they don't
Right.
want to learn,
They
and so
don't.
if they don't want to learn, then embarrass them. And this is a big deal because I am not a person for shaming. But the only way that a person is going to be pushed to
I
change in
am.
that situation,
I'm a
yeah.
person for shaming.
And so at that point, shame them, make them feel uncomfortable, tell them that it's not okay, tell them that you're not comfortable hanging out with them until they decide that they're going to educate themselves. Make it just make it hard for them. I'm seeing a question here that keeps saying, what do we do if
Yeah,
what can we do if we
and
don't
I
march?
was going to ask you, and this goes back. I said to you before, like I know there are a lot of people who do genuinely want to be allies and want to help, but they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to go to the extreme of marching, going to protest, things like that. So, what are some things aside from the family one is a great example. I saw a couple people write about that as well. Confront your
Mm-hmm.
family members. What are some things, actionable things that people who want to be an ally can do that is within their reach that make your community feel supported?
So, talking about purely from home, first, I think that there needs to be some self work done. And I suggest, and there are so many out there that I can't even really think of too many off the top of my head. I feel like there's a book called This is an Anti-Racist Book, which is pretty good. But I suggest finding as many books about these tropes, these underlying racist issues that we have going in society, and read about them. And don't just read them and be like, okay, I read the book and I've memorized these, what next? Read it and figure out as you're reading it, look inside yourself as you're reading it, even if you have to take breaks between chapters, and take a moment to say, does this apply to me? And if it does, try to figure out some way to work that out of yourself so that you can be a better ally. If you're talking about donations, there are a whole group of great groups to donate to that don't not only help the Minneapolis protesters, but protesters all over the country. There are some just for the LGBTQ plus community, and there is an article. I'll have to find it and I can send you the link afterwards and you can put it up in your stories. But there is a great link that compiles a number of them. And that is also an option. I will caveat with that if you give money, giving money is great, but you do still have to walk the walk. If you give $500, but you're still trying to educate a person of color on what being a person of color is about, that still suggests that there is
Don't
work
just give
to be
the
done.
money and say my
Yeah.
job is done here.
And
I
I'm
over.
done. It's finished. Yeah, no. And like I said, if you have a friend who is not uncomfortable with answering questions, don't be afraid to ask. I am like I said, I'm the kind of person, I love when people ask, and I love when people show that they are interested in trying to better understand where I'm coming from. But if you ask, listen. Don't talk over. Yeah, just listen.
And I think too that you're bringing up all these resources, and how lucky are we that even though there may not be everyone who's willing to be as open and candid as you are and do the education piece of it, we have so much content from incredible writers and incredible voices and books and articles and things that people can at least start to scratch the surface and read some of it and educate themselves without, if they don't have someone in their lives they can ask, or if they don't have the
Absolutely.
resource they can reach out to. And so I'll look to, and if you want to send me some stuff, I'll
I
share it.
will.
But there
I
is
will.
no shortage. Where are you getting information from these days? Like what is your favorite source to like get real unbiased, you know, updates and news on the stuff that's really important to you?
So, I tend to look into groups. Like I like to check out the NAACP. Um, and I always say this wrong. I might be getting the letters mixed up, which makes me terrible. Sorry, but I think it's
No.
the HBCU, I believe is what it is. It's a It is a group of universities specifically for people of color and historically Black colleges. And they tend to have a lot of very good resources as well. And just in terms of me personally, for my people, see, the sad, and then this is going to sound very sad, I have still not found a good source for that. I have seen sources shared by some friends that have been pretty good for like an article or two, but sadly enough, I have not found anything that has been cogent enough. And so that's really kind of hard for me to even say out loud, but it's true. I haven't really found anything because I've wanted to talk about these things and I've wanted to have articles that I could read on these things, and it's been very hard. I know that sometimes if I go to Medium, I can probably find people of color who have written good articles, but it's very hard to find any sort of website that's kind of that's all encompassing.
What what do you think about all of the large companies coming out with all of their messaging on different content platforms showing support? Do you think that it is, because I've seen a lot of articles about that, a lot of
Right.
articles saying that it's amazing and wonderful because
Mm-hmm.
it's helping to shine a light. I've seen articles downplaying it, saying, why now? Like, what do you think about, I guess, what do you consider genuine support and support that is, like we talked about, a little opportunistic and not for the right reasons? How do you tell the difference?
For me, it is spending history, and it's all about whether or not this is the first time you've said something. Like, if this is the first time you've ever said anything about race ever, then yeah, I'm going to come at it with a very skeptical eye because
Yeah,
you're just doing it because everybody else is doing it. But
right.
a great example of a company that, to me, puts their money where their mouth is Nike. Because when Colin Kaepernick was getting all of that shit from all these other people
Mm-hmm.
for trying to, peacefully protest, now what they're saying that we should be doing, even though we were ripped to shreds about it before. Uh, Nike, they put their money where their mouth was, and they gave him an endorsement deal.
Mm-hmm.
And despite all of the shit that they got from people saying they were going to burn Nike shoes and that, oh, I'm never buying Nike again, Nike still stuck with it. And some people rolled their eyes and said that it had to do with money. But to me, reasonably, the fact that they had to know they were going to get blowback. They had to know that they were going to get all
Absolutely.
kinds of shit about it, and they did it anyway. And to me, that was all I needed. That was something that made me a fan of Nike for life.
Well,
So,
that goes back to your point, though, about doing things where you get uncomfortable, knowing,
mm-hmm,
like knowing as a person, as a brand, you can't not do something because you're afraid of losing followers
mm-hmm,
or losing audience. Or, I mean, I will be totally honest with you because we're having a candid conversation. When I posted our picture in my feed that I was doing this, bleeding followers. And I said to myself, how do I have people? Seriously, how do I have people following me who posts about everything? I'm not like, how do I have people following me who are so close minded that the minute I post that I'm going to be talking about some tough stuff in our society right now, they bail?
can
Because
I answer that? Can I answer that?
yes,
Because I because I
yes,
I know the answer.
yes,
Um, it has to do with some of that systemic racism I told you about. See, if I say something, I guarantee you that if I say something, it's expected, right? They're expecting me to be mad, but you look like them. They don't expect you to be mad. To them, it's a betrayal. Because and they might not even notice it. That's the terrible thing. I guarantee you that if you could find all of those people and yell at them and be like, wow, how can you be like this,
but
they
it's
would.
so gross. It's
Oh,
so
it's
gross.
gross. Oh, it's
But it's so
terrible.
gross, and I think, what am I doing something to
Nope.
perpetuate those people coming my way? Because if they're, it is so, again, it sounds so naive, and I know everyone's not built the same way, but like, I just can't imagine in today's day and age, with how open-minded most of us are with the stuff that we put out there and the way we share ourselves and how vulnerable we are, and we give a glimpse into our lives, the fact that I would share that I'm having a very real conversation over something so important, I couldn't even, I was like, first of all, bye. Don't let the door hit you on the ass on the way out, because I don't want you here. But second of all, really? Like, really? That's
I
where we
promise
are?
you, not that I am making excuses for them, but it is 100% subconscious. I guarantee you that all it was is they saw that you were going to say that, and they went, and they did not question why. They didn't try to guess where it was coming from. All they knew was that they had a very visceral reaction, and it scared them, and they left. But I'm just saying, because it's the same reason why my friend got it so bad from my Twitter, the tweet that she shared. She is a white woman, and she posted something that to them, for whatever reason, was detrimental to white women, and to them, she was betraying them. So they were angry because, unfortunately, subconsciously, you guys are not expected to want to talk about things, especially if it might put white women in a bad light.
Well, let me be very clear. I want to talk about it, and I'm going to talk about it. So anyone who doesn't want to hear it can peace out with the rest of them, because I'm going to talk about it.
Do you want to hear something crazy, though?
Yes.
I posted, and it wasn't even that tweet. I posted a tweet where I said something along the lines of, like, you know, after these deaths that have been occurring, like, you know, I don't ever want to hear anything about how, like, your rights are stamped on again. Like, honestly, very on brand for me. I've been a huge, like, I've kind of been a dick since I started, so it's not really much of a surprise to anyone. I kind of figured everyone would be like, yep, that's Arianna. I still lost. It was the first time I have ever lost more followers than I've gained. And I remember looking at that, and you thought, you were like, where did these people come from? I was like, do people not know I'm black? like, do I need to post a picture of myself? Like, who are the people that are surprised that I said this? Who? I was so, like, shocked. I was like,
It's crazy.
It's
People
bizarre.
Are crazy. And this little world is crazy. It's like a little fishbowl, and I love it and hate it. It's crazy. A couple people have asked, so I want to make sure I get to it, because a few people have asked about kids. You have children.
Yes.
I have children.
Yes.
A lot of people are asking about resources and books for kids. First of all, I want to know how you talk to your children about this. Have you talked to your children about this? I'm sure it's an ongoing conversation in general, but, like, this specific instance, do your children know what happened? Have you talked in detail about it, and how do you address it? They don't.
I'm going to be 100% honest. And this might sound weird coming out of my mouth, I don't know. I don't feel comfortable talking to them about it right now. I don't. And the reason that I don't is because I feel like my conversation is going to have to be very deep with them. It's not just going to be some bad men hurt another man. It's going to have to be, for me, this is why, I'm going to have to go into how even some cops are bad. And my son is extremely smart, and he will ask, and he will say, but aren't we supposed to go to the police when we need help? And then I'm going to have to start going down this horrible spiral of, well, yes, but also, it's a conversation. It's a conversation that I have to be honest, I am not ready to have yet. He's not even 6, and I want him to believe, at least for a little bit longer, that the police are the good guys, before I have to start having conversations about how even some police can't be trusted. So I will say we have had very frank talks about skin color, to the point where it's kind of a nothing deal. Like, my son will say, Mommy, you're brown, and he has olive skin. So he'll be like, you're brown, and I'm white. And I'm like, you're olive skinned. But that's the extent of it, and even when I said olive skinned, he was like looking at his arm like it might have actually turned into an olive. Like, he didn't quite understand what that meant.
Right.
So I think it changes from child to child. I really do. And I just don't think my children are ready yet. I think that there are some kids. I have a friend whose son, her name is Jennifer. I don't know if she's watching. Hi, Jennifer. Her son is very bright, and he's 7 years old, and he has walked past enough CNN that he has figured out what's going on. So she has had to have that conversation with him. And the most that I can say, because somebody was saying, like, how would I discuss this with my kids? I just saw that question. And the most that I can say, hi, Jennifer just said hi because she heard me say hi to her. And the most that I could say is, you're going to know your kid best. And I'm sorry if that's not helpful, but I don't want to tell you to tell them something that would work for my kids and then have you be like, it terrified my child. Why did you tell me to say that? The most that I would offer in the way of advice is that if you are going to talk to your children about that, just make sure that you explain that there are good people out there and that it is going to be up to them, you know, to notice when people are making those mistakes, and that it is going to be up to them to speak out if they can. And just make sure that they know that the whole world isn't like this. That's probably the biggest suggestion I can have.
I think that's a really good one, though. And it's so important that you don't feel comfortable talking to them, because I started to talk about it for the first time with my 11-year-old. My 3-year-old has no idea what's going on. But my 11-year-old, it's really funny because I thought in my head it would come out so eloquently. And I just had like a moment of verbal diarrhea because she just caught me at a bad time. And I was like, there's bad things happening in the world and you need to, and I literally was like a crazy person. I was like, all right, I need to take a step back because she's not going to hear anything I'm saying. But I do think that there's this like pressure on mothers to break the cycle and to talk to their kids in what, and you're so right. And I'm so glad that you're not just like throwing advice of like, this is what you should say, because everyone's kids are different. Everyone's parenting style is different. That being said, I do think that when everyone feels comfortable or whatever their own way is, there do need to be conversations.
Oh, there do. There absolutely do. Yes. And when my children get old enough, there will definitely be a conversation. And I have a feeling with my son, I've probably got maybe another year or two before he's going to start asking questions that I'm going to have to answer. But you know, I don't really think there is any one way. I think that you just need to make sure that you stress that that not everybody is that way, and that you teach them to be people who listen and who stand up for the right people, and who also are not afraid to admit when they're wrong, and that when they're wrong, they listen. They don't try to cover up that they're wrong. They ask questions. They teach themselves, teach them how to read up on things that they just don't quite understand. You teach them those basic skills, and the talk about skin will probably just be secondary, and then they'll be able to kind of follow along on their own.
Yeah, so. I think you perfectly said. Are there any, I know a lot of people are sharing titles for books for kids. I've seen, and I saw something I have saved that I need to share, but do you have any favorites that you've seen floating around specifically for children? No.
Unfortunately, no. I know that there are plenty out there, but I am going to say that right now my son and daughter are still obsessed with like dinosaurs and ballerinas. So essentially I haven't really had a chance to be like, hey, let's read this book that's not about a dinosaur or a ballerina. Right. What I will say I have been doing is I have been making a point of pointing out when I see people on TV who have things in common with them. I have been using that. So for example, one of my daughter's favorite princesses is Merida from Brave. And what I point out is, look, Merida has wild curly hair just like you. And she adores that. She doesn't even, you know, she recognizes, she actually does recognize that she does not look like Merida. But she thinks she can be a princess like Merida because of her hair. She thinks she can be like Elsa because of her attitude. So by making it so that she's able to see those things that are connected, she's actually, in some ways, she might actually be too in love with herself. Because I have had times where I have been like, who's the cutest little girl in the world? And she's like, me. So I just, you know, I might have done a little bit too good of a job, but you know, we're going to have the skin conversation at some point, so I'm not the best on kids' books right now, but I will say that we have already started with the building blocks by making sure that they recognize parts of themselves in media, movies, and characters that they like. So
but that's almost better than any book you can recommend. I think that's such a beautiful way to help them forge connections with people who are not like them, to show them that those differences are not as blaring as people are making them seem. And in their little minds, like to us that probably seems like such a little thing, but in their little minds, the way they're brain is firing off neurons to make those connections, is probably pretty impactful to how they will look at things later if you continue to do those types of things consistently. Right? I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm not, I don't have a degree
I
from
mean, neither
Facebook,
am I,
like all
clearly,
these,
but yeah.
people diagnosing things. But I would imagine that it's a very healthy exercise to start setting up with your kids, because we see, if parents act a certain way, if parents believe certain things, whether it's verbalized or not, our kids pick up on it.
Absolutely.
And so the only way that we are going to have a difference in that generation is if we do things differently. And that was another reason why I really was so happy that you agreed to speak with us tonight, because I don't want my kids to grow up to be assholes who are jaded by this type of thing. I want them to be outraged and upset when these things happen. I don't want them to be complacent. I don't want to be complacent.
No.
And so I'm so grateful that you're here and that you're openly discussing this. And I know it's been, hard for you to be on social. Like you said, you took a step back. So thank you.
Well,
And
this actually was great. So I appreciate you bringing me for it. Yeah.
I'm so glad. Is there anything else that I know we talked about a lot of things, but is there anything else that you wanted to put out there or cover that we did not touch upon that you feel is important to all of this?
Okay, so 2 short things. 1, if after we are done with this, anybody here has any extra questions that they've been afraid to ask publicly, or think something that they think about afterwards, remember, I love educating. I do. I'm a real fan of it. I think that it's the only way to combat ignorance. Feel free to go ahead and DM me, and I will do my best to either answer it, or, as you can see, I am not afraid to tell you, I don't know, and I'll just send you someplace where you will find the answer. But I will help you, because that's the only way that an ally can be an ally, is by learning. So that's number 1.
Tell them where to, just in case they don't follow you.
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me at the NYAM Project, and NYAM stands for Not Your Average Mom. It's all together, Not Your Average, the NYAM Project, and it's all small letters, nothing special. You can find me that way. We're also, if you decide that you want to spend more time on Facebook, I'm also the NYAM Project there, the NYAM Project on Twitter. You can find me basically under that name anywhere. And the second thing is just, what I do want to make sure that I point out is that being an ally does not mean being perfect. If you screw up, if you say something that you weren't supposed to say, if you are told that something that you said was out of line, I know that hurts, and it's going to be like a punch to the gut. Accept it. Say, you don't even have to thank them. I don't believe in that. Like, it annoys me when I find out I'm wrong about stuff too, so that's okay. But at least internalize that, take it, and change. That's the most important part. Learning is the most important part of being an ally, and that's it.
I love that. Perfect soundbite. It's like you've done this before. It's like you know exactly what you're doing. And really quick, before I let you go, I'm just curious, what do you think about everyone? Like, what is your stance on continuing to, I know you don't have the energy to be funny right now. Do you find it offensive, people posting memes and jokes about daily life? What's your stance on it? You think it's okay to
I don't.
Those things go?
I think it does kind of make me look at people sideways when they don't say anything. That makes me a little nervous, just because, like, and I'm going to say this right now, it is a little bit worse for me when it's a white person who says nothing. I'm not going to lie, because to me, I'm like, the more voices we have, the more amplified we are. And, if you're not saying anything, that makes me very uncomfortable. That being said, I understand that some people are just, they just don't know what to say. And not everybody is going to want to. Earlier on, people were saying I'm grieving. I think that is accurate. I'm grieving, and some people don't grieve the same. Some people are like, I just want to grieve privately. I want to deal with this privately. So here's a joke for everybody out there who needs it. I'm going to go sit and I'm going to go, cry privately. Some people want to be honest about it. I'm not going to sit and judge anything. Might I look at you a little funny? Yeah, sure. But I'm also not going to assume that I know what your thoughts or opinions are. Unless you decide that the first thing that you're going to say is something about riots or property damage, then I'm going to be like, okay, look. But other than that, everybody's handling this a different way. And I really appreciate people like you know, who are wanting to handle it in a way that suggests that we all become more aware. But I'm not going to hate on the people who just don't feel like their souls can take that right now. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you're very kind,
Thank
and
you.
I appreciate you.
I
And
appreciate you as well.
I
Thank
hope
you.
there are better days ahead for all of us. And I want you to know, and I'm saying it out loud, I am an ally. I am. And I am not perfect, but I will continue to do whatever I can from my end to make sure you and everybody around you feels my voice and support, because this is not okay. And I invite everybody who is watching, anybody who watches in the replay, to do the same in your own way, whatever that means. But we
Mhm.
cannot just sit here and accept our world being like this. So
We
thank you.
can't.
No,
Yeah, and thank you.
no.
Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody who's been watching, who's been listening. This is how it starts. This is how it starts. So I really appreciate all of you. And you are one hell of an ally, Rachel. Thank you very much.
I got you. I got you. Have a beautiful night, and we will talk soon. Good night to everybody. And if you need Arianna, you can DM her. Like she said, she's super friendly, unless you're an asshole. Then I can't promise. I can't
Then I'm
promise
an
she'll be
asshole back. But
friendly.
otherwise, yeah, we're good. Otherwise, totally feel free.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night. And Arianna, I will talk to you soon.
Okay. Night, everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.